You're listening to Science and Saucery, a show dedicated to adding life to your years. And now your hosts, registered dietitian Juliana Hever and scientist Ray Cronice.
Welcome. How are you doing today?
I am fantastic, Raymond James. How are you?
I am very excited. I'm very excited about our guest today.
Me too. One of my favorite people on the planet.
He's been amazing. We're talking about Michael Greger. He is a physician, a New York Times bestselling author. He's an internationally recognized speaker on all kinds of things in public health. He's lectured at countless symposia and conferences and institutions. He's testified before Congress. Both of his most recent books, How Not to Die and How Not to Die Cookbook, both became New York Times bestselling books. He's got a new one, How Not to Diet, coming out December 10th, so about the time this podcast hits the street. Michael's a graduate of Cornell University School of Agriculture and Tufts University School of Medicine. He's a founding member and a fellow of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. But I think we all know him best as the voice and brains behind nutritionfacts.org. He's been an incredible resource and fantastic friend to Juliana and me, and we are so fortunate to have him join us here today. Dr. Michael Greger. Hey, Michael, how are you doing today?
I am doing exceedingly well. I'm so excited to be here and excited what y'all doing.
We are so happy to talk to you today, Michael. Thank you so much for joining us.
Anytime. Let's do it.
It's going to be fun. And so, I thought we'd start this a little bit differently than a lot of these podcasts are because, the three of us have known each other for so long. Of course, you and Juliana have known each other even longer than I've known both of you. But, you and I used to have these Sunday chats when you were driving from one thing to the other, and we would talk about a lot of the sort of behind the scenes on nutrition facts. And, one thing that you and Juliana and I have all done or talked about in the past was the idea that sometimes it would be great to find some things that didn't work well on a plant-based diet. And I thought, maybe the three of us could talk a little bit about just the whole concept of confirmation bias and what all of us try to do to get around that. Because I think I'm going to say this and you can then take it from there, but if you really could find something where this didn't do well, you've said in the past to me, it would actually make you feel more comfortable. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's this kind of panacea effect, right? That's the trademark of every snake oil salesman going back, centuries, is that my snake oil can heal all your aches and pains, and it works for this, it works for that, and it just sounds a little too good to be true. And so wait a second, the exact same diet that can prevent and reverse heart disease is the same diet that can prevent and reverse high blood pressure, the same diet that can prevent and reverse type 2 diabetes. Wait a second, that's just getting a little too come on. But then you realize some of the underpinning mechanisms by which diets help, and then it becomes clear and a little less kind of magical thinking. Because you realize, so for example, in terms of heart disease, for example, right? A plant-based diet is the best at opening up arteries without drugs, without surgery. The only diet ever proven to reverse heart disease in the majority of patients, whole food plant-based diet and lifestyle program. And so it's all about improving artery health. So no wonder it can reverse coronary heart disease. But is the heart the only organ in the body that requires blood flow to transport nutrients and oxygen and to get rid of waste products? Well, wait a second. All of the organs in our body require adequate blood flow. So no wonder that an artery healthy diet is a whole body healthy diet. Another component is inflammation, for example, right? A whole food plant-based diet is synonymous with an anti-inflammatory diet. And we now know that inflammation, this low-grade smoldering inflammation, plays a role in so many of the diseases, including, diabetes and heart disease. And so, no wonder an anti-inflammatory diet would affect all these various diseases that have kind of an inflammatory component. So once you realize the underlying physiological mechanisms, well, no wonder that a heart healthy diet is a brain healthy diet, is a liver healthy diet, is a kidney healthy diet.
Yeah, it's so amazing, and we had another show with David Sinclair at Harvard, and David through the metabolic winter hypothesis and oxidative priority papers with me, but from a longevity researcher's perspective, he can't go to the FDA in the pharmacological interventions that they're doing. He can't go to the FDA and submit a drug for aging because, aging's considered to happen to more than 51% of the people. It's not considered a disease. But one of his theses is that when we treat aging, we end up treating this underlying mechanism that impacts all of these different chronic disease states, or certainly age-related disease states. And what Juliana and I have been pushing with a health span diet or with the food triangle is that eating on the right side of the food triangle is probably the best way to mimic dietary restriction without malnutrition. And so I might even let Juliana say a little bit about this, but about nutritional adequacy versus deficiency, because even in the last 10 years, her message, and I know yours as well, has changed a little bit when it comes to that.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started, like 15 years ago, I was defending the adequacy of a plant-based diet. Like, no, you can get your protein, you can get your blah, blah, blah. Like, that was, it still is everyone's number one concern. And I mean, we've talked about this too a long time ago, where it's like, I wanted to, it sounds like you said, it's too good to be true. How is it possible that it's a one-size-fits-all way of eating, one thing that you can do for all of this stuff, aging, health, everything? And it's just kind of mind-blowing that we've been looking. Like, I remember we asking, well, is there anything we're missing? I want to make sure there's nothing we're missing. But, you've scoured the literature probably more than anyone I know. I've never seen anyone read at the rate and in depth that you do, Michael. But it is the evidence just keeps building. And
the disease states keep building. So now, I don't know if you're aware of this new International Journal of Disease Reversal and Prevention. I encourage everyone to go to ijdrp.org and new peer-reviewed medical journal, and it's free, so you can subscribe. There's 2 issues out already, and it's talking about finally a medical journal on reversing chronic disease, and so they have case series on putting a plant-based diet to the test against lupus, for example. Probably our most inflammatory disease, because it's when our body starts attacking our own DNA. And for the first time, a case series on a whole food plant-based diet versus heart failure. So we've known about heart disease, but what about people whose hearts are weakened, inadequately able to pump blood throughout their bodies, never before been looked at, saw absolute remarkable, miraculous reversals. We're talking ejection fractions down to 25%, up to normal, never before described. Really exciting stuff. So it's like the list of diseases that we're able to impact, and not just impact positively, but in many cases, like with Crohn's disease, for example, or now ulcerative colitis. Now we actually have randomized controlled data on ulcerative colitis, not just helpful, but the most effective medical intervention, period. Not the most effective natural intervention. No, works better than any drugs. We're talking 100% remission rate by 1 year, 90% remission rate by 2 years. No drug can do that. And what do? We use the plant-based diet. And now we just had published, I just scripted some videos on the ulcerative colitis data. Same absolutely remarkable results, better than these new biologics, which cost minimum $35,000 a year, up to $70,000 a year. The horrible list of potential side effects. They're taking these immunosuppressant drugs, and they all don't work better in fact, don't work as good as putting people on a healthy diet and treating the cause. What a concept.
What a concept. Something you were not taught in medical school as even being possible. Something I was not taught in nutrition school as being possible. So that's what it is. Like, we have to stop. I have stopped defending the adequacy of this diet and, in fact, celebrate that what it is naturally, whatever, restrictive or whatever it is composed of, all the beautiful benefits of eating plants and all of the things that you are not getting by consuming animal products and processed foods. It's the best form of medicine that we have.
You know what? I think it's interesting, a point that you raise. Doctors and dietitians are raised with two kind of antithetical viewpoints when it comes to nutrition. Of course, this is doctors that know anything about nutrition. Often ignorance is what they bring to the table. Mm-hmm. But, dietitians, if you look back at the history of dietetics, it was born off these deficiency diseases.
Yep.
We have a field of dietetics because we realized all of a sudden, oh my God, there's like these deficiency states, pellagra, beriberi,
scurvy,
pernicious anemia, scurvy, right? And so all of a sudden we were discovering new vitamins. All of a sudden there's fats that are essential. Oh my God, we need a whole new field, TPN, everything. So all of dietetics comes from this kind of deficiency standpoint, and they're always questioning the adequacy of diets. Where are you going to get X, Y, and Z? Where it's ironic from the medical standpoint, what people are dying of in terms of nutrition is an overabundance of nutrition.
Yeah,
right?
chronic
Things they're getting too much of.
Chronic overnutrition.
Right. So they're getting too much. So more people obviously are suffering and dying because of too much sodium or saturated fat, trans fat, etc., as opposed to not getting enough. Like, when's the last time you saw someone with an X, Y, or Z deficiency? It's interesting. So, for example, Brenda Davis, whom we all absolutely love, just was at a recent lecture I gave. And we were talking about soaking one's nuts, and that
always a good conversation.
Should we soak our nuts or not? And the concern, of course, about soaking nuts. Soaking nuts can get rid of the phytates, which we're always taught are mineral absorption blockers, anti-nutrients. So we should soak our nuts. So that is so Brenda was all in favor of soaking nuts, right? Because it comes from this deficiency standpoint. Wait a second, you're not going to get enough. You're going to absorb less zinc,
right?
If you eat your nuts without soaking them. Whereas I'm telling people, no, don't soak your nuts. We want the phytates. These have anti-cancer properties. Now we have this whole body of data. I have a bunch of videos about the beneficial aspects of phytates when it comes to reducing cancer risk. And so it was very interesting. That was a great illustration of. She was like, "Well, what about zinc absorption?" I'm like, "How many people are dying from cancer versus zinc deficiency?" Right?
That's exactly her thesis.
It's just like that's the way. But that's just kind of it's in your bones as a dietitian.
Yes.
To want to make sure you check off all these boxes.
That's what we're taught. It's a completely a model of deficiency. Everything is based on deficiency and avoiding deficiency. Always err on the side of more and enough.
Right. And what an ironic state. So no wonder, you see the Academy of Nutrition Dietetics, so geared towards these kind of commercial interests, because it's all about just stuffing more into people. What company doesn't want to hear that kind of message?
Yeah, and Juliana was at a booth, working for somebody at a booth one year, I think it was about 2 years ago, at the annual Fancy. And I went there and walked around the floor and just listened to the questions the dietitians were asking at all the booths. Of course, the booths are just deluged with food, right? It's chronic overnutrition on steroids, right? So
yeah, but it's like fast food and junk food and
sweeteners. No, they were all just piles of apples, right?
Right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, but actually, I did learn there about apples and pears. There was an apple and pear person, and they were talking about this time, how much time they're stored before they actually get to the store. But that's a different story.
Fascinating.
But the point here is that when I was walking around listening to the questions the dietitians were asking, it was it was just my stomach was in knots because I'm thinking this is who these are the people that are going to go out. And I'm not saying that any of these people, it's not about smart or intelligence. It's they really are taught to think this way. And they are still taught with a model that evolved when food was economically scarce. And that's one of the things we bring out in Metabolic Winter Hypothesis was the idea that the calorie and the idea of using protein, carbs, and fat as organization of food was really around economic organization and what happens when you're barely getting enough. When you're barely getting enough.
Sugar is amazing. It's like the cheapest form of calories, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
Wow, calories per pound, the stuff per penny, right? Per dollar.
Right.
Vegetable oil. You want calories per dollar, chug it down.
Right. And when death from insufficient calorie is a choice, which isn't for most people today, but when that's the case, obviously on a scale, death or having a little extra refined sugar in your diet, it's probably not bad. In fact, a lot of the early Arctic explorers often used sugar because of the non-shivering thermogenesis, the heat. That's what we talk about in the oxidative priority, the postprandial surge in that heat that our body uses to waste. It doesn't store the sugar as fat. It actually burns it off as waste heat. And so sugar was considered critical if you were going to be out working in the cold. And obviously you could get that glucose source from fruit, etc. But in terms of low cost and where this whole model of nutrition evolves in the early part of the 20th century, this becomes the sort of the foundation or the hallmark of not just medicine, but the cookbook. And one of the places we've taken a little churn in the HealthSpan solution, we deal with a little bit with that history in the beginning. But what we're trying to do is say, hey, look, you can have sweet, salty, oily, umami, these bitter, sour, these basic flavors of the palate without getting excessive nutrition, without getting excessive adulterants. And we really identify them like they did, 60 or 70 years ago as food adulterants. And not that that's just a negative connotation, but it's a reminder, don't use too much, because people going around right now and thinking either a teaspoon of oil or a teaspoon of sugar as being poisonous is also not a very helpful part of the conversation. Or to delineate it, we can have sweetness, we can have the oily mouthfeel without overnutrition. It doesn't have to be sort of a binary abstinence kind of approach. Does that make sense?
Right, no, and it's this, and it's just this magical thinking that undercuts our credibility, right? I mean, it's like people that go around saying, remember there was a whole guy, Robert Cohen or something, like milk is a deadly poison or something. That was like his book or something, and it's just like instantly your credibility is gone because wait a second, I know someone who drank milk and they didn't die, so obviously you're just an idiot, right? I mean, and so I mean, it's it's unfortunate, but people love that kind of black and white thinking, right? I mean, certainly. The political climate these days, people just want to know these kind of rigid rules, which may have kind of psychological benefits. Some people, it's difficult for people to deal with kind of the gray areas, moderation, etc. But if you're interested in the evidence, if you're interested in the science, you really just have to lay it out as it is.
I finally found this. I wanted to find this article because it was driving me crazy. There's an article. It was the 1957 by Portman and Hegstead called Nutrition. And all the way back in 1957, there's this whole article about there have been warnings against gluttony since time immemorial, but until very recently, overconsumption of foods was not a major concern of the nutritionist. Like basically blaming what we have done in dietetics. That is the reason for this epidemic of overnutrition. So I'm sorry to go backwards.
It's interesting. I think in my new book, I talk about, I have some quotes from the medical literature back in like the 60s and 70s talking about obesity when it was rare. And they were talking in these such dire terms like obesity is always a tragic disaster, blah, blah, blah. And now it's just like so humdrum, right? Yeah. I mean, that is just like, before it was like, oh my God, they have some terminal illness. This is a medical emergency. And now it's just we've become so inured to the threat that it poses. That,
and it's become absolutely,
yeah.
there's a movement to normalize it. It's become normalized, and it's almost half the population now, but there's this whole social movement too to normalize it. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, that and part of that comes from the a pushback against the very real, very tragic social stigma that comes along with weight.
Yes.
But of course, that goes too far when they try to flat earth the science.
Yeah, and one article Juliana and I reference, and I've referenced in a lot of the papers we've written, because I think it's one that physicians as well should look, and it goes on this whole spectrum of balance and where we've perhaps gone to extreme, but it's Jeffrey Rose's Sick Individuals and Sick Populations. Have you read that?
Oh, that's the classic.
And the very first paragraph, why did this patient get this disease at this time? As being the starting point, and we're not doing that anymore. And in fact, most of what's happening could be replaced by a well-programmed, the little game 20 questions, right? The little thing that guesses what you're thinking. What we're really doing is going through a decision tree for managing a set of symptoms. I mean, that's what obviously emergency medicine has been incredible, and infectious disease control, incredible. I mean, there's so many advances in medicine. So, if something happens, you're going to have a little bit of time, or you're going to get a second chance to make some better life decisions. But we're not asking the basic question. We're just playing symptom whack-a-mole. And I think when you look at those two dichotomies, on one hand, this idea that nutrition is all centered on deficiency when most people are having issues of chronic overnutrition. And then on the other hand, most intervention is centered on managing symptoms so that lifestyle doesn't have to change. And that to me seems to be the place where I feel like we can really move. And what I wanted to hear people to hear our conversations, the kinds of conversations, we all have when we're not being recorded, when we're not on the front of stage. Not that we're saying anything radically different, but these frustrations that we have, we're not just celebrating the fact that, wow, this seems to take care of everything. We're really trying to pick holes in this, because all three of us are pushing for how can we use diet to the best of its ability.
Yeah, well, certainly I'm going to have I'm going to do a webinar probably January, February on all the new B12 stuff. And so, look, you want to hold a poke. There's the poke, right? There are, so when we're kind of poo-pooing deficiency states, it's ironic that we are proposing a diet, one of the few diets that is that is deficient in a critical nutrient for which could kill or maim if didn't get sufficient. There's insufficient attention given to it. And there's still studies continue to come out with ridiculous percentage of people following plant-based diets having insufficient
B12. And it's such an easy fix, such an easy solution, so easy to avoid.
Yeah, and that becomes this idea that I think sort of overlaps. It's the, if you will, the vegan and the carnivores, where I think they overlap in their and being overly zealous about their ideology of what they should eat. This idea that natural means perfect, and natural doesn't mean perfect. Evolution is just change over time. Evolution doesn't seek to perfect organisms. It just you just change through, both, sometimes selective pressures, but sometimes through random events. A lot of things that happened along are essentially random events. And this idea that, somehow you have to achieve all your food in some natural state, that's not science. And we know about B12. In fact, not only do we know what happens with B12 when it comes to a plant-based diet, but we also know what happens after someone's 60.
Oh, yeah. It doesn't even matter if you're on a plant-based diet. Anyone over 60 is at risk for B12 deficiency, and everyone needs to supplement. 50. See, Raymond, I told you. We were going back and forth on 50 and 60 because there's different references. So you're right now you're saying 50.
No, that's not me. I don't say nothing.
No. I know.
You
your interpretation. You're just like the most on top of the literature.
No, what do you mean? The Institute of Medicine. They're the ones that put the daily allowances. At age 50, we need crystalline B12. There's only 2 ways to get that. That's B12 fortified foods or B12 supplements. Period. 50.
All right. I'll accept it, but 60 years is the one I know. So if you go look if you go to look at, like, for example, the Balk and a couple of the other papers, those are all, they all say 60.
Institute of Medicine.
But
RDAs.
50.
Come on.
All right. I will accept it.
Now, and
I'm doing my B12 and I'm 55. So
you're just in the nick of time. So, Michael, I cannot wait to see How Not to Diet. Tell us about your brand new book.
Real quick, before How Not to Diet, because I want you to tell one more story that I found fascinating. And this gets into the stereotype that somehow if you get into a plant-based diet, you're only going to eat salads and come out on double coupon Tuesday. Not that we don't all love salads, but can you guys tell the story of recently being at the lecture, at the talk you guys were giving and going out looking for food? You guys were going to slay a meal.
I told Raymond, I was like so excited to finally have a minute with you because I hadn't seen you in so long. And we went.
Oh, yeah, how funny.
And we're trying to figure out where we were going to eat, but we had this long day.
I think this is going to describe not just undo some of the stereotypes, but the real challenges that everybody is out there. So you guys go.
Oh, no, we're like, where are we going to eat? We had this long day. We just kind of wanted to find a spot to have something healthy and delicious, whatever, easy. And that we were like, let's just try right here at the hotel where they had put us up. And I said, hey, do you have anything? We're looking at the menu. Hey, do you have anything that's, plant-based? And she looks at me. I'm all like, I don't even know if I don't think I even said vegan. I said, like plants.
Yeah, plant-based, yeah.
Yeah, and she goes, like salad? And you're like, okay, we're going to find somewhere else. And it took us like 1 minute to find a great place that was really close, and it was great.
But it was just an idea that you don't always have to compromise for nothing. There's tons of side dishes out there at restaurants, and when you're out eating, maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is the most healthy and 1 is you probably shouldn't put it in your mouth. Maybe it's a 5 or a 6 because it's at a restaurant. You can do some things to steer them in the right direction. But it's not a 2. And for someone like you that's on the road all the time, talk a little bit about food and being on the road, because you travel an insane amount of days. Yeah.
Well, the new book, I got 200 cities over about 10 months. And it's, it's brutal. And basically you end up eating pretty crappy. I mean, what are you going to do in an airport food court? You do the best you can. You pack snacks, so you don't end up famished somewhere where there's no options. And look, if you get lucky, you can find a Whole Foods with a hot bar and you can, get some, pick and choose some really healthy foods. But otherwise, you stick to a lot of ethnic cuisines. There's a lot of vegetable centric kind of things, and you do the best you can. Now, with all these meal delivery services, it's so much easier, right? Because I'd end up in a hotel somewhere, and it's already getting late, and I'd be like, all right, what's in walking distance? But now it's like, well, in 45 minutes I can basically get any food anywhere in the city delivered to me, and so that's made it kind of a lot.
Oh, that's
easier.
interesting.
That's a good tip. That's a really good tip.
Yeah.
So
So
with that, go into How Not to Diet.
How Not to Diet will be out December 10th. I am so excited.
2 weeks.
I know.
Yeah, crazy. It comes out of our shared frustration, and how sick and tired we are about the nutritional nonsense that comes out of the diet industry, feeding us this endless parade of quick fix fads that always sell because they always fail, right? Repeat customers is kind of the whole business model, yet people line up right back up to be fooled again. So that's why you have to stick to the science. And so my goal was to create, the oxymoron, an evidence-based diet book. And so literally thousands of citations from peer-reviewed medical literature. I just wanted to find every possible, tip, trick, tweak, technique proven to accelerate body fat loss, to give people, every possible advantage to kind of build the optimal weight loss diet from the ground up.
I can't wait.
That's gonna be great.
Pre-ordered mine.
All right.
I've read it, and I think it's absolutely amazing.
Of course it is.
I love it. Love it.
Nothing Michael does is not absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's great.
That's super
But,
sweet.
you know, it's really good, you know, that we're able to aggregate all of the references as well. So one of the
Yes.
things, you know, you mentioned Brenda Davis earlier, and I know that Juliana and I certainly Juliana before I came along, you know, rely a lot, you know, that her books had a lot of amazing references in them. And now with all the nutrition facts videos, it's you know, I can pretty much go into, you know, any subject and get a really good starting place. But we're starting to really bring together a large collections of references. I know we're going to dump a lot more references. You know, our cookbook, which is kind of crazy, has, you know, something 200 and something in it, and it's really neat that there's so much literature to choose from. You don't have to hunt long to find this.
Yeah, one really exciting thing about How Not to Diet is one kind of unique aspect is that all the thousands of citations are actually hyperlinked online to the original source. So there's a QR code in the back of the book, and you scan it, and you can click to download PDFs of all the studies, access the original research yourself. How cool is that?
Oh, that's
that is a
fantastic.
That's
treasure
insane.
trove.
That
No
is
book,
fantastic.
No book has ever done that, as far as I can tell.
Oh my God, I'm like giddy with anxiety. I'm so excited.
Isn't that insane?
It's going to
And
be
so,
great.
Like, instantly. Yeah, I mean, that's that. Yeah, so that's like a whole nother level. It was actually supposed to be up today, but tech team's still working on it. But I mean, it just has to be up in the next 2 weeks. But still,
Amazing.
super excited. Yeah.
Certainly by the time everybody hears this, it'll be there, and we'll have a 2-week jump on everybody.
Yeah. Oh
Awesome.
my gosh, thank you for doing that. That is such a gift to the world.
Yeah,
Oh my God,
that's what we
yeah, big
need,
team.
and it's what we need. And you know, again, I think we all really want to be challenged. I want to reiterate the way we started here that we want to be challenged on this. If we can find some places like B12 or even K1 versus K2.
I found
or
B12, the
D8
50, Michael. You read really closely, the 50 instead of 60.
But there's all, yeah. I have a bunch that are here that are 60
I know,
as
but this
well.
is IOMDRI.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We win.
Oh,
We're all on the
I'm
same
saying
page.
as well. But the thing I was going to say is that, you know, K1 versus K2 or the, you know, the latest, and we can talk a little bit about this, the DHA versus DHA EPA. You know, there are some moving targets and there are some things we need to think about. And it still seems like the extremism ends up dominating the headlines. And I wish we could somehow, like, on one hand, we have access to more information than than the most powerful human in the world 25 years ago. And then at the same time, we also now are deluged with a dilution factor of BS. And so how do you think we start to reconcile some of these things? Like, for example, the, you know, eat nuts, don't eat nuts, or the you know, the whole latest thing on DHA EPA. Have you given that any look?
Yeah, no. So you stick to the science. I mean, period. I mean, that's all. I mean, so it's basically, look, you have to realize no one was born with this information. So anytime anyone makes any statement of fact, they need to cite it. They need to not just cite it, they need to show it to you. They need to give it to you. I said something. Well, where'd you get it from? Do you read it about on some blog? Do you read about it on some checkout aisle magazine? Where did it go? Why should I take that seriously at all? So give me the science. I want to see the science. And so you look at the science and you see, and then you put it in context of everything else that's been written in that field, and then you see what's the best available balance of evidence. Now you say, well, that's easier said than done. Well, that's why I started nutrition. I mean, that's why I do. That's why I do what I do. But I mean, that's what it always has to come down to. So it's like, where'd you get it? And then, you know, the gold standard is peer-reviewed medical literature, which has a lot of problems, but it's like that that quote attributed to Winston Churchill, you know, democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others. And it's the same thing. It's like peer-reviewed scientific literature, the worst form of, you know, decision-making material, but it's better than all the others. It's like there's nothing else. How else can we make decisions?
Right.
But based on the best available balance of evidence that are life and death decisions for ourselves and our families.
Yeah.
And so then it just comes down to, all right, here's the body of evidence. And so let's look at it together.
Yeah, so why don't you step some people through? This would be something that we normally wouldn't talk about, but with us, I think it's kind of the geeky right subject. let's step through the trials and start with, what happens when you have a metabolic ward all the way up to sort of like a meta-analyses and how some of these, actually all of them have a value, but maybe what's happening, because you also have seen probably more than anyone the huge surge in writing titles, abstracts, and conclusions to grab headlines. You're seeing that too, is right?
Oh my
right?
God, the annals.
It's crazy. It's
right,
crazy.
I mean that you're right. The whole series in the annals of the whole red meat. That was the perfect distillation. Perfect distillation of that.
Yep. So talk about the different kinds of trials you see in papers or the classifications of papers and how you tend to weigh things out when you're looking at them.
The gold standard, when possible, is double-blind, placebo-controlled trial. You can do that with some things. You can't do that with others. And it doesn't mean the evidence is useless without it, right? So, for example, we firmly establish smoking causes lung cancer without randomizing people to smoke. But look, if it's possible, that's what we ideally have. So, for example, this DHA EPA thing. The fact that low blood levels of DHA are associated with accelerated brain aging, okay, that's evidence. But what you want is a randomized, controlled, double-blind trial. Give people DHA or placebo and see if you can actually stop brain shrinkage. And that's been done and been published. And so here it is. Here's the evidence that you can actually reverse that brain shrinkage with aging by supplementing with DHA. So that's why we recommend people consider supplementing with DHA.
Right.
That's, it's been put to the test. And you can say, well, look, that, what about, financial or ideological conflicts of interest? Those are absolutely real. But one can't just throw out a study because it was funded by the dairy industry or funded by the Coca-Cola.
Right.
Well, all it has to do is you just have to look with an extra grain of salt. You have to put that extra scrutiny into the materials and methods. Was this study designed to get a desired result, friendly to the funders, or not? Or is it science we can rely on? So you just have to take a little more time with a study. But if you threw out all studies funded by industry, we'd have no drugs. All drug trials essentially are funded by industry. Now with NIH funding declining, it's basically we would have no field of medicine. So does that mean we shouldn't be skeptical of Pfizer saying a new drug is great because of their Pfizer funded trial? Of course we should be skeptical, but that just means we got to look at the data closely. And how else can we make decisions?
Yeah,
good advice.
That's all perfect. So, was there anything else you want to leave our audience with before you go on to your
launch
next,
this beautiful book into the world?
Just the good news that we have tremendous power over our health, destiny, and longevity. The vast majority of premature death and disability is preventable with a plant-based diet and other healthy lifestyle behaviors. And I am thankful in this Thanksgiving season for all the work both of you are doing, and I can't wait to get out there and spread the good word.
Oh, likewise.
Thank you so
Michael.
much.
You're the best.
It was great to have you today, and I really appreciate all the support you've given us over the years. It's been just fantastic. We're gonna have to get back on this again. I think everybody will enjoy it, and maybe we pick a study and dig in on something. I think people would actually like watching how we chisel down through something, and it's not something you hear very often.
Sounds like a great nerd fest.
Yes. Okay, well, thank you for joining us today.
Take care, Michael.
Have a great night.
You too.
Wow, that was absolutely fantastic.
What a treasure trove gift to the world. Extraordinary. Thank you all so much for joining us on this leafy green path to good health.
It's always the food. So remember,
keep eating right.
Thank you for listening to Science and Saucery. For more details about the content in today's show or to contact Juliana and Ray, please visit us at healthspansolution.com.
Welcome